Welcome back, everybody. Zenimax has dropped the latest iteration of the PTS Dragonhold update, and this one is kind of a big deal, and this one I think a lot of people have been waiting to read because there have been some big changes to damage over time abilities in the Dragonhold patch with these recent changes. So let's take a look at what they've done here. And we're going to scroll down right into the meat of the changes, and we're going to start at Necromancer. So the first thing is Gravelord. Boneyard has increased the damage per tick of this ability in its morphs by 20%. So this is nice that we see the 20% increase here. I'm just going to preface this this video by saying that the AoE dots got about a 20% increase, and the single target dots seem to have gotten around a 33% increase in strength. Now the next change to the Necromancer is the major vulnerability from the Frozen Colossus will now last 8 seconds after dealing any damage, rather than 3 seconds after the final smash. Enemies hit by the major vulnerability cannot be affected again for 20 seconds after it applies, to prevent situations where a lot of Necros can keep this debuff rotating on an enemy. So I think that this is actually really awesome because the initial change to the Frozen Colossus to make it apply the vulnerability only on the last hit was really detrimental to this ability for PvP, because the vulnerability is pretty much what makes this a great burst ult for PvP. So changing this to the 8 seconds off of any hit is actually going to make it better than it was on live for PvP, but worse than it was on live for PvE. So I think this is a fantastic change. This is exactly what they kind of wanted to do, I think, with this ultimate. So a really good choice there. Now, this is another nice change that we see for Necromancer here, and the Rapid Rot increased the damage bonus for this passive to 15%, up from 10%. So Necromancer will deal 15% additional damage with dots rather than the 10% from before. And I'm just going to skip down to this passive here. The Dissidian Harm increased the damage reduction for this passive to 15%, up from 10%. And this is the damage reduction that Necromancer naturally gets to incoming damage over time attacks. So they're going to be more resistant to dots, and they're going to have stronger outgoing dots than they did in the previous iteration of the Dragonhold patch. And compared to where we are on live, Necromancer should definitely see less damage over time. Everyone's damage over time will go down comparatively to where it is on live, but with Necromancer, they will be, you know, interesting in the fact that they're getting boosted a little bit here. It makes Necro kind of a good option for a dot build, more so than it was before, and it was already a good option before. Reusable parts, they increase the cost reduction granted from this passive to 25% to 50%, up from 12 and 25%. Okay. And then Shocking Siphon, they increase the damage per tick of this ability and its morphs by 20%. Now, Shocking Siphon being an AoE as well, it got that 20% damage over time increase. And then Skeletal Mage, and this was something that I think a lot of players were kind of worried about with the damage changes to dots just in general. Skeletal Mage is going to have the damage increase as well, so it will not get the single target treatment. It's going to get the AoE treatment to damage increase that the rest of dots did. But a 20% bonus, still going to be nice for it. Now moving on to the Dragon Knight changes, and Dragon Knight got some interesting treatment here. Fiery Breath, they increased the damage per tick of this ability and its morphs by 50%. So Fiery Breath being an AoE damage over time ability, but it actually got a pretty chunky increase in damage. And I think this is because they wanted Dragon Knight to retain having the strongest class dots in the game, while Necromancer's kind of going to have the strongest all-around dots, and you can pick and choose. So the DK dots will just outperform comparatively to some other class single target and AoE dots, I guess. And this change is kind of reflected with that, and that's Zenimax kind of going for that class identity, I guess, that they wanted with Dragon Knight. They're going to gut the wings, they're going to gut everything else, and now they're just the dot class. But hey, now moving on to Searing Strike, they increase the damage per tick of the dot of this ability and its morphs by 33%, repeating, of course. So this is awesome, and there we see, you know, we get that 33% damage increase on this single target dot, and this is the first time we've seen that, but we'll see that across the other dots as we take a look here. Now, Nightblade's Assassination Teleport Strike, the Lotus Fan dot has been buffed by 20%, so that's good. Path of Darkness has also had a 20% damage increase, which is awesome as well. Summon Shade with the 20% increase. The pet's got the 20%, which Shade is a pet. And then the Shadow Image. Now, this is big because this was a big issue that people had with the PTS Dragonhold iteration at the beginning. Shadow Image had been nerfed down to 22 meters for the teleport. It is buffed back up to 28 meters, but will not not be affected by things like Battle Spirit, etc. I like this change. This is much better. I think this might feel like less than we see on live, because on live I think it's getting affected by things like Reach and Battle Spirit. Now, Veiled Strike, they reduced the cost of the Magicka morph of this ability to 2,295 to better match the spammable from Surprise Attack morph. And then Siphoning, Cripple has had the damage increased by 20%. So Cripple is actually the only single target dot, I think, that didn't get the 33% damage increase. Cripple just got the 20% there. Now, Sorcerer's Storm Calling, they have made some changes to Bolt Escape, and I think this was definitely the way to go. Ball of Lightning, they took away the stun for enemies at the end of the location, but it does retain the new Snare and Immobilize immunity, as well as it still absorbs incoming projectiles behind you. And I think this is a good change, because having it stun at the end, as well as absorb projectiles and give you the Snare and Immobilize immunity, Ball of Lightning was looking to be way too attractive. Now, Streak, they've changed it so it continues to stun enemies at your end location in addition to stunning enemies behind you after ending. Note that to damage opponents with this ability, you will still have to pass through them. So I'm thinking the Streak stun is still going to be a lot larger than it is on live. This is something I have not personally tested, and something I do want to test with this new changes to the Streak stun. And yeah, I like this. I really like the Ball of Lightning change, though, because it actually gives you a reason to run the other morph. Lightning Splash, being the AoE dot, has got the 20% damage increase as well. Daedric Summoning, the Bound Armaments morph, has had the damage increased by each dagger dealt by 21%. The Summon Unstable Familiar, being a pet, has had the 20% damage increase, which is awesome. Same with the Volatile Familiar morph. And then the Winged Twilight has also had the 20% damage increase as well. Now, for Templar, Adric's Spear, Luminous Shards, they have decreased the base cost to 4,320. Now, not all AoE damage over time abilities had the cost decrease this patch, as well as the damage increase. Only some did. But this ability will continue to decrease in cost down to 4,000 at rank 4. Blazing Spear has had a 20% damage increase rather than a 10%, and overall the damage over time of this ability and its morphs have been increased by 50%. Now, Adric's Spear got a big damage increase comparatively to the other AoEs, similar to the Dragon's Fiery Breath, and I think the reason that it got such a huge damage increase is just because the base damage on the dot is very, very low. So it makes sense because the base damage is so low, and Burning Light is really where the damage from this ability is going to come from anyway. Now, Dawn's Wrath has had a 33% increase in damage, which is absolutely fantastic. And then the Solar Barrage has had a 22% increase in damage, being the AoE kind of pulse damage over time. That is going to be a good change for that too. And then finally, moving on to the Warden, we've got Dive, the Animal Companion Spammable. This will now set your opponent off balance if you are 7 meters or further away rather than 12 meters. I really like this change. 12 meters was a bit far. Actually, in the past video where I went over this change, I had said it should be less, like 7 meters, and yeah, that's awesome. Zenimax put it right there, and this is going to make this a lot easier to use and a lot easier to take advantage of that off-balance mechanic with the Warden. And then Cutting Dive, they increase the damage over time of the bleed by 43%, and Swarm, they increase the damage over time by 20%. Now, if you guys don't remember, in the last iteration of Dragonhold, Swarm was a stronger damage over time comparatively to some of the other ones. It got nerfed less hard than the other ones did. So this increase of only 20% kind of makes sense. And then the Cutting Dive morph getting that huge bleed increase, this is going to be a fairly powerful bleed, I think. So this will be fairly interesting to see as well. And then Winter's Embrace, Impaling Shards, they reduced the cost as well to 3,240 Magicka, and now the damage has been increased by 80%. So this one got a very interesting treatment. It's going to be pretty cheap, to be honest, and very, very powerful. And then, of course, Winter's Embrace has the snare attached to it as well. So there we go. Now, moving on to the weapons, Two-Handed Cleave. Carve has had the damage over time increased by 50%. This one got such a huge increase because it had been nerfed so hard on the PTS, so I think this one is well warranted. And then Crit Charge, the Stampede morph, has had the damage increased by 38% as well, and I think this is a good change because the Stampede dot is also not incredibly strong on the Dragonhold PTS. Now, Dual Wield Blade Cloak has had a 20% damage increase, which is great. Twin Slashes has had the standard 33% increase like everything else, and then Blood Craze, the healing will be increased by 33% as well, just to match the damage coefficient. Poison Injection, like everything else, has got that 33% increase. Absolutely fantastic, I think. This was really needed. When I was on the PTS last patch looking at some of the dot tooltips, namely my poison injection on my Templar, it was rough. I had a really great damage Templar and under a 10k poison injection tooltip, so this should bring that right back up. Honestly, I'm thinking that your damage over time abilities should feel about 30% weaker than they do on the live server. So get on the PTS and test your numbers, guys. Let me know how you feel about the dots, if they're in a better or worse place. But a big change to the poison injection has been that the morph now applies the execute to the entire ability rather than just the damage over time. So overall, poison injection's damage should be higher than just the 33% increase, because we'll start getting that execute bonus right away. So we'll have to see how this plays out on live. This might actually be an incredibly deadly dot in the game now. Volley has had a 20% damage increase for the dot on it, which is great for the AoE that it gives. Really nice. And then Destruction Staff, Destructive Touch, they increased the damage of the Destructive Reach morph by 33%, and then Wall of Elements got the 20% increase as well. Now, moving on to the world skill line, Soul Magic, the Soul Trap has only got a 20% damage increase, and I think they only did this one by 20% because it is unblockable, undodgeable, making it much easier to apply than the other abilities, and everyone has access to it going for a mag or stam morph. So the fact that they left this a little bit weaker, I think, is good. If someone needs a supplemental dot or an additional dot on their build, it's a great option, but if you just want to take one dot, this is maybe not the best choice depending on what class / build you're on. So I like this change. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this one as well. Werewolf, the dot for Infectious Claws has been increased by 50%, a massive increase to that. And then the Werewolf Berserker, they increased the bleed damage over time by 24% as well. So big buffs to Werewolf there, which I think they desperately needed after the initial nerfs they took in Dragonhold. Fighters Guild Trap Beast, they increased the damage over time by 33% as well. Really nice stuff. And then the Mages Guild Entropy also only got a 20% increase. And I actually like this yet again because Entropy is supposed to be more of that secondary ability, not your primary dot. It gives you the Major Sorcery. So the fact that it had the Major Sorcery plus one of the most powerful dots in the game, well, I like this. It should bring this more in line with the other Magicka dots, as well as still giving you that unique functionality that it offers as well. And then finally, this Scalding Rune has had a 60% increase in the dot. I actually really like this because Scalding Rune is a very unpopular morph choice in this game. And of course, alongside these changes, we have had a few changes to dot sets, and these ones are going to be very interesting, and I'll talk about their impact after we go over them. Blood Drinker increased the damage bonus for the bleed abilities to 33%, up from 20%. That's a huge increase there. Deadly Strikes, they also increased the damage bonus to 20%, up from 14%. So those are just two dot sets that kind of got changes, just fixes for the other two sets there. But this is really huge because stamina damage over time builds kind of got a huge buff with this. This is, let's see, 6%, 13%, almost a 20% increase in stamina damage over time build effectiveness if you're using both of these sets, which, you know, you could possibly be doing. This would be a good set combo, Deadly Strike, Blood Drinker, bleed build. So there you go, guys. I think that there are a lot of really good changes here. Dots were absolutely neutered in the previous patch. So to see them go back up in power for this patch, I think is really good. Comparatively to live, like I said, we should be seeing about a 33% nerf in general to where dots are right now. So things should be, I think, a little bit better, especially in PvP compared to where we are on live. We maybe won't see such as heavy of a dot meta, but at the same time, I don't think they're going to nerf dots into uselessness either. So I would love to hear what you guys think about these changes. Specifically, I would love to hear what you guys think about your hard values. Once you've got on the PTS, what do you guys think about your damage over time tooltips now? How do they feel when you use them in combat? Please let me know. For me, I think that this is a really positive step from Zenimax. I really like seeing this. This is nothing but a patch note of we heard what you guys said as players, and we made the changes that you guys said we needed to make. Now, there are still some changes that I would love to see come to Dragonhold before it hits the live server, namely the cast times on Ultimate, but you know, I gotta say, I'm really happy with these changes, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about them too. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you guys want to send in any content to be featured on the channel, you can send it to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. We are sponsored by What the Fast. They're a VPN for gamers. They give me better ping to my favorite games, and they're free to try for the first 30 days. No credit card to sign up. So if you guys want to give them a shot, link in the description below for you. And then last but certainly not least, if you guys really love the show and you want to help support it, you can always become a patron on Patreon. Without your help, I wouldn't be able to do this job. So thank you guys so much just for watching. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and supporting if you choose to do so. And have a great night, everybody. I'll see you next time.